Welcome back to Phil Always Wins. UFC is finally back, and this time it takes place in Mexico City, where we have Brandon Moreno taking on Kavanagh. Before we get into the full card breakdown, make sure to follow me on Instagram so that you guys can check out my betting tips. To kick off the early prelims, we have Damian Pinas taking on Schultz. Both of these fighters are making their debut in the UFC, but I do think that Damian Pinas is going to edge the win here. The odds do favor Damian here, sitting at a times 1.4 compared to Schultz, who's sitting at a times 3. But I think the odds are right here. Now, Damian Pinas is 8-1, with 7 of those wins coming by way of knockout, so it's safe to say that he has knockout power. In his last fight against Vitor Costa, he got a round 1 KO, and I think he'll be able to do it again here. To be honest, I think Damian has already fought fighters similar to Schultz. If not, he's fought better fighters. And so I don't think he's going to struggle all too much here. Damian has shown us that he has decent takedown defense, and he's definitely got the striking advantage here. On the other hand, we have Schultz, who is 8-2, and he is a D1 wrestler. He has an awkward style of striking, which doesn't really benefit him because he doesn't generate that much power from his strikes. And his main game plan here is definitely going to be to take Damian down. In his last fight against Mario Mingaj, he was able to grab a round 1 submission win. And to be honest, I don't even know what this submission is called. There have only been a few of them in the UFC. Schultz's game plan here is to effectively mix in his wrestling. And he's definitely going to be either looking for the submission win or to win a TKO by dragging him down, tiring him out, and eventually getting the TKO. The only problem, and I think this is a major problem, as we've seen in his last fights, he tends to gas out after round 1, and there's nothing more unreliable than a fighter that can't hold his own pace. I think Damian may get taken down once or twice, but I reckon he'll get up relatively easily. And if Schultz can't keep Damian on the ground, then I reckon he's going to gas out in round 2 and eventually get knocked out. So give me Damian to win via TKO or KO here. Next up, we are moving to the featherweight division where we have Erik Silva taking on Francis Marshall. I have Francis Marshall to win here. Erik Silva is one of the biggest underdogs in this card, sitting at a times 6. And naturally, Marshall is one of the biggest favorites on this card, sitting at a times 1.1. Francis Marshall is 8-3, who's coming off a split decision loss to Marion Santos. So he'll definitely be hungry to get into the winning column again. Marshall is a very quick and sharp striker. Coming into that fight, a lot of people thought that if Marshall didn't mix in the takedowns and decided to just stand and bang, that he'd find himself in a lot of trouble. However, he proved otherwise. He even knocked Santos down. In my opinion, I think that it was a robbery of a fight. Don't get me wrong, it was a decently close fight, but Marshall definitely won that fight. In this fight, he's the significantly younger fighter. He's, I believe, 26 years old compared to Erik Silva, who's 38. And Erik Silva is 9-3, coming off a TKO loss to Mohamed Naimov back in February 2024. Unfortunately, he got a leg injury literally 15 seconds into the fight, and he hasn't fought since. He has a karate background, and he has some decent striking, but overall, as an MMA fighter, I think he's pretty mid. I don't like that he leaves his hands down when striking. It leaves him very vulnerable. I also think that as a fighter, he's slowed down massively. He hasn't fought in 2 years and he's coming off an injury. I just don't see him getting the bounce back here, especially at 38. Marshall, on the other hand, he's definitely the better fighter here. He's younger, he's faster, and he's definitely more hungrier to get the W here. I reckon that Marshall gets the KO in round 2. Next up, we move into the women's flyweight division where we have a fight between Sofia Montenegro and Ernesta. I do think that Sofia is going to win here, and she is sitting as an underdog at times 2.5 compared to Ernesta, who's times 1.5. But Sofia is 6-2. She's making her debut in the UFC, and she's coming off a loss in the Contender Series against Chairez via split decision, and it was a very close fight where both fighters went to war. It was literally a bloodbath. I like her fighting style, where she puts on the pressure and she kind of walks you down. She always throws heavy combinations and makes you fight on the back foot, which can be very tiring. Sofia has pop in her punches too. And not to mention, she's also proven us that she has a pretty decent chin. She got hit clean a couple of times in her last fight, yet she still put on the pressure and almost got that victory. On the flip side, we have Ernesta, who is 6-1. She's 2-0 in the UFC winning both of her fights via decision. Ernesta is a pretty tall fighter for this weight class with a significant reach advantage that she uses in almost all of her fights. She likes to fight at her range, which is what she'll aim to do in this fight as well. While Sofia is going to try and make this a dogfight, she has to get in there. She has to beat Ernesta's range and kind of make this a scrappy fight. We've seen Ernesta struggle when her opponent has the ability to grapple and take her down, which in my opinion is a major red flag. I think that Sofia is going to successfully mix in the takedowns, but overall this fight is going to mostly be standing. Sofia is the more well-rounded fighter in this fight, and it's a matter of if she can get past the range of Ernesta, which I reckon she could. I do have this going to the decision, so a nice bet would be for this fight to go the distance. But overall, I think that Sofia is going to edge it on the scorecards. Give me Sofia to win via decision. Next up, we have another featherweight bout between Douglas Silva and Javier Reyes. I am backing Javier Reyes to win, and he is a massive favorite here, sitting at times 1.44, while Douglas Silva is times 2.8. Javier Reyes is 22-5. He's making his debut in the UFC, and if I'm gonna be honest, there isn't much available footage of him other than his Road to UFC fight, where he just won via KO in round 1 against Justin Torres in the Contender Series. But Javier does have 10 KO wins, with 8 of those coming in the first round. I haven't watched a fight where he passed round 1, so I'm not sure how durable he is or how great his stamina would be after round 1. Douglas Silva is 29-6, he's 8-5 in the UFC, and he's been fighting in the UFC since 2014. Douglas definitely has the experience advantage here, fighting high-level opponents such as Leron Murphy and the current champion Peter Yan, but he seems to lose whenever he fights high-level opponents. I think this is a pretty even fight, given that Javier is still inexperienced and unranked in the UFC. So I'm not sure I support the odds at times 1.4, although I do think he's gonna win. I don't know if it's worth it to put money on that. Silva essentially has a Muay Thai background, and this fight is going to be standing on the feet. I do think Silva is overall better, and he's shown us that he's pretty durable. My problem is that he's already 40 years old, and I'm not sure if he's still got it in him. Javier, although being 31, I think is more hungrier. He's making his debut in the UFC, and so he needs to make a name for himself. We've seen Silva lose fights simply because he slows down and doesn't do enough. I think he has a very decent chance to win this fight, especially if he can survive round 1 and just pick Javier apart in the later rounds. But I reckon Javier can get the KO in round 1. So give me Javier to win. Next up, we have a bantamweight fight between Quinonez and Kris Moutinho. For obvious reasons, I think Quinonez is going to win here. He's obviously the favorite at times 1.14, while Kris Moutinho is times 5.8. Probably the second biggest underdog on this card. Quinonez is 18-5, making his debut in the UFC. And once again, there isn't much footage on Christian, but he has 10 KO wins, including a TKO win over Vinicius Oliveira, but in a different league. Wasn't in the UFC. He was mixing in the striking and the wrestling really well, but one thing that I didn't like, and it kind of bothered me, was his cardio. Coming into the third round, he was really tired and just swinging for the fences. But I do think that he has the capabilities to end this fight in the early rounds, given how much damage that Moutinho has already taken throughout his UFC career. Kris Moutinho, the punching bag of the bantamweight division, is 14-7. He's coming off a brutal knockout loss to Malcolm, where he got hit by a check hook in round 1. Generally, I think Moutinho has taken way too much damage throughout his career, to the point where he isn't even durable anymore. And I also think overall he's a mid fighter. You know, he tends to be the one that's forward pressing, but he doesn't move his head that much, and he kind of just takes a shot to give a shot. And given his durability, once again, I don't think he's going to be able to do that in this fight. The only advantage he has in this fight is that he's fought high-level opponents such as Sean O'Malley, but I don't think that's going to be enough for him to win this fight. So give me Quinonez to win via KO. Next up, we have another women's fight between Alilin Perez taking on Macy Chiasson. I do think that Alilin Perez is going to win here, and the books have it the same. She's sitting at a times 1.55, while Macy Chiasson is sitting at 2.5. Essentially, Alilin Perez is 10-2. She's 5-1 in the UFC, currently rocking a 5-fight winning streak in the UFC. That is pretty impressive. She's shown steady improvement every time out, and her grappling has really become her identity. She pushes a high pace, she closes the distance aggressively, and once she gets her hands locked, she's relentless with the control and positional dominance. What I like about Perez is her pressure. In a 3-round fight especially, that kind of urgency really matters. She doesn't waste time striking at range if she doesn't have to. She looks for the clinch, she drags you down, and she starts working. Her ground control has been impressive lately, and she's definitely going to be looking to grab her submission win here. On the other hand, we have Macy Chiasson, who is 8-3. She is the bigger fighter and she has a longer reach, so there's a clear size advantage in this fight. She uses her range fairly well on the feet, and she has some solid striking fundamentals and decent power for the division. And when she's able to keep the fight standing, she can be effective behind her jab and straight shots. The issue with Chiasson has historically been her takedown defense. She can get controlled against the cage, and once she's put on her back, she doesn't always scramble with urgency. And we've seen her give up position in previous fights when someone starts to mix in the grappling. I don't think there has been enough time in between her fights where she could improve massively in the grappling aspect. So against someone like Perez who thrives in those scrambles, that could be a major problem. I think Perez could either keep this fight on the ground for 3 rounds, or she could somehow find the submission win. Next up, we move up to the middleweight division where we have Ryan Gandra taking on Jose Medina. I do have Ryan Gandra to win, and the bookies have it the same. He's sitting at times 1.13, while Medina is sitting at times 6. So this is the third times 5 to times 6 underdog in this card. Ryan Gandra is 7-0 and he's making his UFC debut. He's earned his contract on the Contender Series with a knockout win over Trent Miller in round 1, which immediately tells you what his foundation is built around: power and finishing abilities. From what we've seen, Gandra is going to want this fight to be on the feet, especially early on the fight. He carries real knockout power at middleweight, and in a 3-round fight, there's no reason for him to fight cautiously. I think Gandra's game plan here is definitely going to be to test Medina's durability and try to create chaotic exchanges where his power can become the difference. On the other hand, we have Jose Medina, who is 11-6. He's 0-2 in the UFC, both of his losses coming in the first round. A knockout loss to Ateba Gautier, which is understandable. This guy's literally the mini Ngannou of the division. And he has a round 1 submission loss in his last fight to Dusko Todorovic. He was getting pieced up on the feet prior to getting subbed, so I do think he was going to lose that fight anyways. But Medina's most realistic path in this fight is to survive early on and try to weather the storm. He can't afford to get drawn into reckless striking exchanges in the first few minutes, because if he tries to match Gandra's power shot for shot, that plays directly into Gandra's strength, and instead he likely needs to slow this fight down, take him down, slow him down a little bit until he tires out, and see what you can do in round 2 and round 3. But unfortunately, I don't think he's skilled enough or durable enough to do that, and I reckon Gandra will be able to get the knockout in the first round. Next up, we have another bantamweight fight between Angel Pacheco and Luna Santiago, where Luna Santiago is another massive favorite. He's sitting at times 1.16, while Pacheco Angel is sitting at times 5.4. I believe that's the 4th massive underdog of this card. But Santiago Luna is 7-0. He's 1-0 in the UFC, winning his debut via KO in the first round with a nasty left hook. This is going to be a close fight in my opinion, and I don't think this is as easy of a fight for Santiago as people are saying or as the books have it. What stands out about Luna is that he's not just a one-dimensional striker. He has 3 knockouts and 4 submission on his record, so even though he's comfortable striking, he's proven that he can finish fights in multiple ways. That versatility matters in a 3-round fight where adjustments are key. In every fight, Luna looks composed and efficient. You know, he doesn't rush exchanges, and he seems comfortable fighting at his own pace. In a pure striking battle, that composure can win you the fight. On the flip side, we have Angel Pacheco, who is 7-3, 0-1 in the UFC. He's primarily a striker with a boxing base, and he's shown solid durability throughout his career. All three of his losses have come by way of decision. He literally went to war in some of those fights, so it really does speak of his durability. Stylistically, this does look like it'll play out primarily on the feet. Both fighters are comfortable striking, and unless Luna decides to mix in the grappling, this should be a pretty competitive fight at range. The difference for me is that Luna has already shown that he can perform and finish at the UFC level, while Pacheco is still trying to establish himself. Because of Pacheco's durability, I don't see a finish as the most likely outcome. If he stays disciplined and slightly outworks Pacheco, that should be enough to edge the scorecards for a unanimous decision. Next up, we are heading back to the flyweight division where we have Imanol Rodriguez taking on Kevin Borjas. I do have Rodriguez to win here, and he is sitting at a times 1.22, while Kevin Borjas is sitting at a times 4.4. Rodriguez is 8-0, and he's making his UFC debut after winning a UFC contract in the Contender Series via a round 1 KO. He's an undefeated fighter, and he's coming into this fight with so much momentum. Rodriguez is primarily a striker, and he's been training with DC, so although we haven't seen him utilize his wrestling, we could see him mixing things up the longer this fight goes. He throws straight down the middle, stays balanced, and doesn't overextend recklessly. I think he's very technical. He's not wild, he's measured. And that's important, especially in the flyweight division where speed and timing matter more than just raw power. On the other side, we have Kevin Borjas, who is 9-3. He's 1-2 in the UFC, and he's a legitimate threat at the flyweight division with real power. He even dropped Joshua Van, the current lightweight champion, which shows that he can hurt high-level opponents. Borjas is dangerous early and willing to exchange. However, Borjas tends to slow down after round 1. He doesn't completely fade, but his volume definitely drops. And in a division where activity wins rounds, that matters. If Rodriguez can stay defensively responsible early and keep his output steady, he could start taking over in round 2 and 3. Borjas is pretty durable, but I could definitely see Rodriguez clipping him in round 2 when he starts to slow down. So give me Rodriguez to win this via KO. We have another flyweight fight between Edgar Chairez and Felipe Bunes, where I'm taking Edgar to win here. Another massive favorite of the card, sitting at a times 1.27, and the books have Felipe Bunes sitting at a times 3.75. Now Edgar is 11-5. He's 2-2 in the UFC, but he's shown himself to be a dangerous grappler at 125, especially with his submission threats. In the UFC, he's been competitive in chaotic fights and looks comfortable in scrambles. He's aggressive when opportunities present themselves and doesn't hesitate to jump on the neck to attack transitions. Then we have Felipe Bunes, who is 13-6. He's 2-1 in the UFC. Stylistically, this is where the matchup becomes interesting. Bunes is more comfortable striking at range and throwing combinations, but if Chairez initiates grappling exchanges, that likely favors him. I do think that Edgar's game plan here is definitely to take Felipe down and try to get a submission win because he knows that Felipe Bunes is best on the feet. Moving up to the lightweight division, we have Daniel Zellhuber taking on King Green. And I think Zellhuber is going to get the win here. Zellhuber is another massive favorite on this card, sitting at a times 1.19, while Bobby Green is sitting at a times 4.7. Daniel Zellhuber is 15-3. He's 3-3 in the UFC and is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. He came into his last fight against Michael Johnson as a -700 favorite, and he was looking good in round 1. But then he just didn't throw as much volume in round 2 and 3. And I believe he was winning round 2 up until he got dropped, which ultimately lost him the round. And I think that was the turning point of the fight, because from then on, he never seemed like he was winning the fight. He's pretty tall for the lightweight division. I believe he's 6'3" compared to Green, who is 5'10". So naturally, he has a reach advantage in every fight, and his main weapon is his kicks, because he can throw them literally from anywhere and still hit you. He prefers to fight at distance, and although I do see potential in his power, especially how hard his kicks are, he has yet to get a KO in the UFC. He also has quick hands, which could cause Green some trouble. I think the UFC are giving him Bobby Green as an alley-oop to get right back into the winning column. Bobby Green is 33-17. He's 12-12 in the UFC, but King Green, in my opinion, is known for his glass chin, and he's only good at trash talking. He's been knocked out one too many times, and given that he's edging 40 years old, I don't think he can take much more. He always fights with his hands down, mainly to taunt whoever he's fighting, but I reckon even if he keeps his hands up, he'll still get knocked out in this fight. You know, Zellhuber has quicker hands, better combinations. He's only 26, so he's entering his prime, and I think Green is going to retire after he gets KO'd in this fight. Next up, we have a bantamweight division for the co-main event of the evening between Marlon Chito Vera and David Martinez. This is a very tricky fight, and I keep going back to back on who's gonna win this fight. But ultimately, I have to go with David Martinez here. He is sitting at a times 1.3, so he is a heavy favorite compared to Chito Vera, who is times 3.5. Do think that there is value in betting in Chito Vera because there's a likely chance that he could win this fight. David Martinez is 13-1. He's 2-0 in the UFC, coming off a unanimous decision win against Rob Font. He also got a KO win in his debut against Simon Oliveira, and this is definitely going to be a striking matchup. Martinez, he has hard body kicks and he always throws with intent. Also a volume striker. You know, he throws long combinations, and if there's one thing that Chito Vera struggles with, it's his own lack of output. So if this fight goes to decision, I think Martinez will 100% win this fight. I reckon he'll land twice as many significant strikes, especially since Chito doesn't really move his head at all. And Martinez has very quick hands, so even if he does try to move his head, I don't think he would be able to avoid his hands. Marlon Chito Vera is 23-11. He's 15-19 in the UFC, and he's a veteran of the sport. You know, he's been fighting in the UFC since 2014. He's currently on a 3-fight losing streak, losing his last fight via decision to Amin Zahabi, where personally I thought Chito won that fight, but it was a really close fight. Definitely 1-1 coming into the third round. In my opinion, what always lets him down is his urgency to end the fight. He scored a nasty knockdown against Zahabi with a stiff jab in round 2, and although he got back up, you could see Zahabi was still recovering, yet Chito didn't go for the kill. He kind of just stalked him and let him recover, and eventually he got beaten. He doesn't go for the finish, and he doesn't put enough volume to win on the scorecard. He's also known for having a solid chin, but I think Martinez has some underrated power, and I could definitely see him being the first to knock out Chito Vera. And just like that, we are at the main event of the evening. We have Brandon Moreno taking on Lonier Kavanagh, and I have Brandon Moreno to win this fight. Moreno is the favorite to win this fight, sitting at a times 1.46 compared to Kavanagh, who's sitting at times 2.75. The formal double champ Brandon Moreno is 23-9, coming off a loss to Tatsuro Taira via TKO, which was arguably an early stoppage. You know, Moreno definitely has the experience advantage, and not to mention the home advantage, given that this event is taking place in Mexico City. The perfect setup for Moreno to get back into the winning column. And Moreno has said before that he wants to eventually challenge for the belt again. So I do think he's dialed in to win this fight, because I think if he loses this fight, he should retire. You know, he's had a great run. I don't see him getting another shot at the belt if he loses this fight. However, Kavanagh has superior striking compared to Moreno, but we haven't seen Kavanagh fight for 5 rounds before. We know that we can trust Moreno's pace and stamina to put on the pressure for 5 rounds. You know, Moreno is also pretty durable, and I think Kavanagh is going to have to knock him out to win. We've never seen Kavanagh shoot for a takedown either, but if he does, we know we can rely on Moreno to scramble out of it. I think this is just too much of a jump in competition for Kavanagh, so I have Moreno to win via decision or submission. Kavanagh is 9-1. He's 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a KO loss to Charles Johnson where he just got too confident. He was sticking and moving, landing hard shots that I was surprised didn't knock Charles out. But then he just kept his hands down. Charles was able to capitalize and clipped him. I really like Kavanagh's fighting style. He's really quick and, in my opinion, a decent prospect for the flyweight division. He hasn't gotten a KO yet in the UFC, but he has very quick hands and decent power. He'll be more aware to keep his hands up, but he has a very tough opponent in Brandon Moreno. At the end of the day, it all comes down to, can Kavanagh get the KO win here in round 1 or 2? Because I think if this goes to round 3, 4, or 5, Moreno's gonna drown him with his constant pressure and slick boxing. So I have Moreno to win via decision or submission. And that'll do it for my full card breakdown for UFC Fight Night, Brandon Moreno taking on Kavanagh. Let me know in the comments who you guys think is gonna win the main event, and make sure to follow me on Instagram so that you guys can get alerted when I post my weekly bets. Peace.